Hi there, and welcome to Art for All, the Sketchbook Skool podcast. I am Danny Gregory, and I'm the founder of Sketchbook Skool, and I am a writer and an artist, and I'm also friends with John Muir, who is going to now introduce himself.
Hey everybody, I'm John Muir. I am a curious naturalist with a sketchbook at my fingertips.
Interesting. I always admire your creativity and coming up with new ways of describing yourself.
It's
Good.
just my multiple personalities.
Excellent. Good. Well, I'm glad that this version of it is here today.
We are happy to be here.
Well, welcome all of you, all the multitudes that your body contains.
Yes. I contain multitudes. Isn't that Whitman?
I know. I feel like we talk about that quite a lot. I think it is a recurring motif, our schizophrenic natures. Well, it's true. I mean, we're writers, we're artists, we're other things, we're dads, we're West Coasters, we're all kinds of stuff. So speaking of coasting, I was in Florida until yesterday morning. Actually went on a plane.
Did you get to see a manatee?
No, I saw a dolphin.
Oh, that's
cool. I saw a sloth, and I saw a macaw.
Was this in some sort of a nature center or zoo?
Yeah, it was in a cocktail reception.
What was the sloth drinking?
He was asleep. He'd been overserved, clearly.
That's right.
He was sat
That's
down.
So embarrassing when you're.
He was just draped on some woman's.
Does it?
Yeah, he was draped on some woman's neck, as they will, and he was. But I'll tell you, he was a babe magnet. There were women lining up to coo and ooh and ah over him. Something about sloths. I don't know.
The sloths are also a naturalist magnet. I would be all over that sloth, even if it was just napping. What a fascinating little creature, and also to just the whole style of going so slow, and it works.
Yeah, like why haven't they been eaten by faster creatures?
Yeah, the whole sloth plan, it actually works.
It's crazy.
And they get to go to cocktail parties.
And they look kind of like a backpack made out of like a carpet remnant. Honestly, it's not an attractive animal, and it has those long claws. I don't know. I'm not that into it. I mean, I know that's probably a controversial thing to say, but I found it mildly repulsive.
Well, then perhaps I guess maybe the sloth's not for everybody. But I'll tell you, my two daughters, they are so into sloths. They've got multiple sloth stuffies. Anytime, if you show up with a sloth sticker, you're dad hero for the day. So
it's funny.
If you ever get to sketch one, they'll be doing like, this will be a 15-minute pose. So
it's true. They are natural born models.
That's right.
Yeah, they are. So that's probably why there are so many. Like, there's a disproportionate amount of representation in cartoons and toys and stuff like that, because artists have always found them easy to deal with compared to cheetahs, right? Or, flies. So anyway, the macaw I thought was much more striking. And the dolphins there were like 30 of them in this sort of body of water, and they were kind of swarming around. And that was sort of interesting. Yeah,
That's cool. So these were wild dolphins, not some dolphins in a dolphin show. These were
they were. They
dolphins
were. I think they were in
doing
a
dolphin
dolphin.
things in a dolphin place.
No, I think they were in a dolphin show. They were.
Oh,
There was a woman in a wetsuit with a bucket of fish
ah,
standing
well,
by
there's
her.
that. Okay.
Yeah, they were. They were. They were very tame. I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was the whole thing was. I was there for the cocktails, but you know, it was. It was. It's not the way I like my nature. Honestly, I like it in my
Hmm.
backyard. I like it. I like it natural and free.
Yeah,
But
I agree with you that although I will take a sloth any chance I can get. Yeah.
yeah, it was in keeping with the fact that it was Florida. Florida has a certain quality to it, particularly Orlando, where I was. Orlando is basically like extruded polyethylene. The whole city is made up of artifice and designed for your pleasure, particularly if you're a
Hmm.
child. So,
I have not been there. What brought you to Florida?
American Airlines.
Well, there you go.
I was there because I was at a thing called NAMTA, which I can never remember exactly what it stands for, but it's basically the huge art supply and craft supply conference convention where all the manufacturers who make um, art products all come and show their wares. And then um, people who own art stores come and buy and shop. So it's not for the public, but it is. There were easily 1,000 people there, so it was a really big thing in this enormous, enormous convention center. And there were just like every conceivable brush and pen and tube of paint and new kinds of weird things. And it was interesting.
Yeah, I think that would be an amazing place to get a chance to pick up new toys to play with. But it would also be, I think, very dangerous because I already have this box of art supplies that I don't use sitting in my closet. And there's the stuff that I use all the time, and then there's the stuff that at some point I thought that this would be a good idea, and then it goes into that box. And there might be some things that Diogenes doesn't need showing up at that show. What was something that you looked at that you thought like, okay, this is really useful?
Um, Let me see. There were just a lot of things they were like really squishy brush pens that I liked. There was a whole line of markers that are called mild markers. So they're not pastels, but they're like very light colored. Um, there was a thing that I've sort of seen before, but now I saw it more in person, which is these pan pastels. I don't know if you've ever seen those,
Pan
but they're
pastels.
yeah. So imagine like um, it almost looks like makeup. So if you imagine like round discs of makeup in like eyeshadow and things like that, and then it comes with makeup sort of like sponges on sticks that are like almost like little brushes, and so you can apply it, but it's much flatter than regular pastels, so you can do it in a book and it won't get everywhere. But also you can paint with
Oh,
them and you can have like a huge palette of lots of them. So they're not in sticks, they're in these pans. So they're great to layer stuff on top of. Interesting. I'm looking forward to trying some out, seeing what they're like. We worked with one artist who used them a couple years ago, and they were pretty cool. And she did cool things with them. So that was like a new form that I thought was interesting. Um, I saw a lot of like new lines of products, where it'd be like, here's 15 different kinds of sketchbooks, and a lot of them aren't necessarily hugely differentiated. Um, there's a big trend right now is metallic watercolors.
hmm.
So, So golds and bronzes and silvers and things like that, but they're watercolors. That's pretty cool, particularly for urban sketching. And then I saw a thing that has been around for a while, but I've never tried it out, which is water-based oil paint. So it's oil paint, but instead of having to use turpentine, you can use water with it, which is kind of interesting.
That is.
Yeah.
So,
So
and it
this,
has the long drying time.
I don't know. I guess you can. I guess it's probably workable the way oil paint is,
Hmm.
But it's yeah, it's not like acrylic where in 2 minutes it's um, solid and you can't use it, can't work it,
Hmm.
right? Because oil paint. Have you ever painted with oil paint?
I got to play with a little bit of my grandmother's oil paints, and I made a big mess. But yeah, they you put them on wet, and then you come back later, and it's still wet, and you can move it around.
Yeah, and you can you can move it around, and that's very much what oil painting seems to be about. It's like it's not about layering the way watercolors is. It's about
Hmm.
you know. So yeah, it's a different approach. It's been a while since I've done that kind of painting. Painting on canvas, never really loved it. Always felt too like here's a canvas. That's too, just the form of it felt too important to me.
Yeah, some of the things I've seen done that made me kind of sit up and go ooh. Um, is people who have these little sets of kind of like sort of squares of masonite that somebody had. I saw a person who had this little kind of masonite board holder, and you could sort of slide his these boards into it. He'd pull one out; it was already gessoed, and then he would paint on it. And then he could drop it back into this holder, and then he could kind of head on down a trail with it, and allowed him to do um, sort of. And these were a small format, and essentially do oil sketches.
So like plein air, it sounds like a plein air kind of a thing
Yeah,
situation.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah, no, that I mean, it's just a whole other world of doing stuff that just I don't know. I just never thought that anything I did was good enough to warrant that kind of importance. So I
yeah,
like disposable
I
stuff.
remember when I, at some point I thought I was sort of supposed to do that. If I'm going to be an artist, I'm supposed to do things on canvas. And I got myself some canvases, and um, somebody had given me this giant easel box that had legs that folded out underneath it.
Right.
And so it was like, I looked like a painter. So I got a bunch of paints and I went out. I was working a summer in Grand Teton National Park. And I'd bring this thing out, I would set it up, and I would kind of put the paint down. And um, yeah, it felt like a big production. It was not something that I could. Um, I really like the sort of the impromptu nature of like, oh, well, here's this moment that I've stumbled across, and then I pull out my journal, and boop 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 can drop it down into there. This I this, it just sort of had it sort of felt like it was very much about the event of I am now doing a painting, as a instead of the event of I'm in Grand Teton National Park and there is a wonder of beauty before me and I'm kind of connecting with that. It felt, for me, it felt more about, I was very, I think, self conscious of the fact that I am now painting with this whole setup. And then it didn't really come out very well. And then I felt bad about that because I had this whole contraption, and that felt like it should lead to this 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 aesthetically um, an aesthetically beautiful product at the end. and that didn't happen, and that made me felt bad. So then that went back in the closet, and eventually it was the whole system was given to a friend who actually does do that stuff, and so it passed that on to somebody who I think could use it, but
Yeah, I
it
think
was
I
my
think
fail.
if you go into the public and you have a really elaborate setup like that, expectation is going to be pretty high. If you just pop open a sketchbook and you just kind of just draw something quickly, and somebody looks over your shoulder, you can always go like, "Yeah, I'm just kind of doodling." But if you come and you've got folding stools and tables and elaborate easels and you setting up a whole thing, and then what you do is completely amateurish and lame, yeah, it's not going to go well.
And yeah, in this case, there's nobody looking over my shoulder, but I think my inner critic kind of looked out there and kind of assessed the situation. And um, yeah, I had a hard time in the face of that inner critic.
So there was a guy who had a booth at this show who made the most beautiful easels and like easel table things out of like zebra wood and mahogany, and you could have like your personal saying carved into the back of it. Really elaborate things, like
Wow.
beautiful, so beautiful that you'd kind of be afraid to get paint on it, honestly. But and they had like the little dials that you would use to tighten things up were all made out of like hand carved wooden tubes, and it was gorgeous. But again, yeah, give me a pencil. So
Well, but I could imagine that in there's something that's wonderful is there's so many different kinds of people in this world, and everybody's kind of got their own thing. That's not the I can imagine that for some people actually having an artisan crafted tool that would feel more right for them. That would feel um, kind of like part of the ritual of getting ready to do this and to engage with it.
I guess
Um,
it's for us. It would be the equivalent of having like a really um, elaborately bound sketchbook, right? Moroccan
mhm.
leather with vellum pages and a golden ribbon and those kinds of things. It might be nice in certain situations. Might be like a pretty cool thing to have, you know. But I don't know. Which reminds me, I wanted to read an email that we got from one of our folks, one of the people who listen, somebody who wrote to podcast at sketchbookskool.com, Marin Sheriar. I think that's how you pronounce it. And he says that maybe it's not a he. I'm not even sure if it's a he or she. I'm sorry. Um, they say that they enjoyed our previous episode about art supplies. They would be interested to hear about beginner art supplies. More specifically, if
Mhm.
you could go back in time, what collection of art supplies would you curate for your beginner self? What I imagine is what art supplies I would introduce to my potential future kid. For myself, my ideal beginner art supplies would be something that's good enough that you understand how the medium is supposed to work, but, and more importantly for me, also cheap enough that you don't hesitate to make art with it. I
Yeah.
find that I rarely use my more expensive art supplies because, in my mind, if I'm not creating a brilliant finished piece with it, then I'm wasting it.
Yeah. I once was given a journal that was such a work of art that I felt I had a hard time using it because I did feel like there was something that was supposed to happen, kind of like that easel in the Tetons. There's there was an expectation of I have to be good enough to use this thing, um, and that sort of trick of my mind, I think, made me do a little bit less work.
Yeah, I think people have that though, even with a $10 sketchbook. People just say, "Oh, I own all these sketchbooks, and I just don't want to ruin them by making art in them."
Hmm.
And so maybe that's what we have to talk about because when I started to draw, I used a pen that I'd taken from the supply closet in my office, and some paper from the Xerox machine that I folded in half. And then eventually I bought like I think it was like one of those black Canson sketchbooks,
Hmm.
that cost like anywhere from $5 to $10. Um, and and I knew that they weren't good, but they very much allowed me to not get invested in it and to feel like um, it's okay to do this. I'm not taking myself too seriously, and that's how I began. And I certainly think that starting with a ballpoint pen. I mean, we have artists who teach at Sketchbook Skool. Yeah, you've got one in your hand. We have people who teach at Sketchbook Skool who do incredible things with ballpoint pens. I
Yeah.
mean, you can be a professional artist and sell your art using just simple ballpoint pens. Um, so what did you begin? Is this stuff did you start as a child and therefore you did what children do?
Yeah. My first my first sketchbook, my first journal was um, because my mom had observed me on one of our family field trips. One of her friends came along who was a who liked to sketch in nature, and Neela walked around this meadow where we're on doing this family field trip, and she would sit down and she would draw the flowers, and I was absolutely fascinated by this. And everywhere she went, I was her shadow that day, and my mom noticed that I was really interested in watching her draw, so she got the same kind of sketchbook that Neela had and the same set of art tools and gave that to me as a present the next time we were out having an adventure. And that before that, everything had just been um, on uh, on loose sheets of paper that were had been discarded from an office, so they all had typing on one side, and the other side was for me to draw on. But then I had this book. That first one was spiral bound. But then I moved into hardbound books, and it was also the ones that you described, like those Canson black hardbound books. And you know, they have really stood the test of time. They've done a great job of just kind of taking a licking over the years. And some of them I've had to support the binding a little bit with some duct tape, but they
But the
have.
paper's often pretty lousy in those things. For certain, I mean, certainly you can't use wet media on them. Even markers, I always remember them bleeding through. So, you end up they're not great. I never loved them.
Yeah, well, the there's not kind of the what I learned to do is to appreciate the aesthetic of a book that when it's done, because I would do watercolor on the pages of those, and so the page, of course, would become wobbly, and then the book kind of pushes itself open, so it doesn't lie flat on a table. It's all those pages are kind of
It's
wobbling
alive.
there.
It's alive.
Yeah, and I just decided to myself that I kind of like that aesthetic, that like there's like
I
so
hear
many
you.
little adventures hidden inside this book that the book is pushing itself open. And so I just learned to like the wobbling page.
That
But
made me think of like.
they take
Go ahead.
watercolor on one side of the page and watercolor on the other side of the page, and it wasn't bleeding through. So I do think that those are they're low cost. They're available in a lot of places. They hold up well, and you get enough pages in a sketchbook that you um, you can go on a lot of adventures with them. Sometimes if you have like a book of watercolor paper, there's so few sheets in it that you fill up that book halfway through your adventure.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I feel like I don't know. I've gone through lots of different types of sketchbooks that I've liked, and I tend to just then get loyal to one thing, and that lasts me for a couple years, and then I find something new and switch. Um, and there are definitely a few brands. I mean, the one that I happen to like a lot and like most consistently for the longest time was pretty expensive, and um, but I could always rationalize it by saying I'm going to work in this thing for months, even if it is quite expensive. It's expensive in initial investment, but then I'm going to
Hmm.
use it a lot.
Yeah.
Because I think you can also say to yourself, you know what, rather than thinking this is too expensive to use, you should think this is too expensive not to use.
Ah.
Right? I just put all this money into this thing. I better use it. What the hell? Why am I saving it?
Yeah.
Right? So if it's $35 for a really good sketchbook, which is a lot of money for a sketchbook, I'm fully cognizant of that. But I draw in it and fill it with amazing stuff, and I learn a huge amount out of it, then maybe it's worth it. But I think, as you say, we could do the same with a Canson. You could do the same with one of those spiral bound notebooks from high school. The like
Hmm.
3 subject exercise. I mean, there's no reason you can't draw on line paper. I think that that's a certain
Yep.
aesthetic, and I know several artists who I really like who that's what they work in. They just work in, occasionally they'll like. I've seen people watercolor in those things. All that kind of stuff is part of the aesthetic, I think, of just making stuff. I've just got to make it. I'm not going to be precious about it. I had a friend early on in my sketchbooking life who was a real paper snob. And she would make handmade books out of handmade
Hmm.
paper and she would make them for me. And so I kind of became a snob for a while about it. Um, but that but I also found that there are limitations to that too. I also went through a period of learning to make my own sketchbooks and taking bookbinding classes because I really wanted sketchbooks that were made out of um, basically ledger bond, like heavy Bristol, because that was the paper I liked the most, and I liked it in a book. And so I would make my own because you could obviously couldn't find that. There's a lot more choice now in sketchbooks than there were 20, 30 years ago.
Hmm.
It used to be that there weren't very brands, many styles, and now there's really an awful lot. So, what about disasters? I was thinking when you were describing watercoloring on both sides of the paper, like I've had several sketchbooks I can think of where disastrous things happened. Like,
Okay,
I
this is
mean,
going to be good.
well, the easy one is like a hand-bound sketchbook that I'd almost finished and had with me on a plane.
Oh,
And then, of course, there's like the mad
didn't have it
scramble.
off the plane. Yeah,
Right? There's the mad scramble to get off the plane. And
and
it
then you
was sort
can't
of
go back on.
sitting next to me by the armrest. It was like between my
Hmm.
leg and the side of the chair. And it was only later on that I realized that I'd left it there. So that was
Did
one fatality.
you? So yeah, that's why one of the things when you get a new sketchbook, writing your contact information or taping your business card into it is that does two things. One is if the journal gets lost, I think it is such an intimate thing that people would be inclined. I have lost one of mine and had it returned to me. Um, and it also is a way of kind of breaking in the book. Sometimes when you get this new book, it feels like this is like how do you it's this tabula rasa, right? And how do you break into um, that blank slate? And if you just put your name and your contact information on it, um, that helps. Did you ever get that book back?
No, no, because I
Oh,
hadn't learned that lesson yet. I did learn it, and I've and I've adhered to it ever since. And
ah,
I like.
yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. The two aspects of it: one, um, making sure you can get it back, but also kind of being like an animal peeing on the territory to mark it. Marking the territory, and also you can't return it then.
That's right.
So that was one. Another one was I was in, I think, New Orleans with my son and I had been like, we'd been traveling around a lot. We'd been drawing. and I was sitting on some like steps, and behind me was a door that led into like some kind of courtyard or something. And he and I we had both been drawing, and I had my sketchbook next to me on the step. And then suddenly he said, "Dad, look out." And I realized that like somebody was like washing the courtyard, and the water was sluicing under the gate and coming down the steps. And it just hit my butt, the first wave of water. And I jumped up. And as I did, the water carried my sketchbook down, full of watercolors, carried it down the steps. So
Oh,
it wasn't destroyed, but it was there were it
it
has
was
like
modified.
it has the permanent souvenir, yeah, of that experience
Yeah.
built into it. Then another one I can think of is I came up with a bright idea one day that if I couldn't be bothered to wait for my watercolors to dry or my ink to dry, I could throw it into the microwave.
Oh.
Right? I can hear your
Yes. Okay.
wheels are spinning, right? So you put it in the microwave. I mean, it's just water, right? So it evaporates, and it's not really heating it, right?
Yeah.
So
What's
it's
not to
paper.
like?
Exactly.
Mhm.
So and it works reasonably well, with one exception. I was going through a period at that point where I started to use gold foil in my book. And
Oh, oh, this is great.
I had this
Yes.
technique where I would take a glue stick, and I would like rub the glue stick on the page, and then I would take a sheet of, it's not really gold foil, it's like cheap, you buy a little book of it, and I would put it down, then you rub it, and then it stays down there, and then I could like draw over it or write over it, whatever. So I had some of that in the very beginning of this book. I put it into the microwave, and suddenly sparks like lightning bolts inside the
It's
thing.
arcing. Yes.
I quickly like flung open the door of
That's
the microwave,
great.
and there was like a hole that had been burned right through the sketchbook. It was like the size of a pencil, had gone right
Wow.
through a whole bunch of pages and right
Wow.
into the thing. Yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah, that was pretty cool.
Ah.
So have you
I've
ever
got
had
some.
any, have you
I've
ever
got
had
some
like
sketchbook
like a
disasters.
lion ran off with your sketchbook, or a monkey stole it?
Um, well, so I had sort of similar to your sitting on the steps one. I had a journal that I was carrying in my hand while crossing a log over a very large river with a backpack on, and just sort of a Sierra Mountain stream below me, and I started to lose my footing and just reached down to hold on to the log. Stayed on the log, but my journal didn't, and it dropped into the river below me. And it was one of those rivers that where you're like, you just got to let that one go.
You mean it just was swept away,
Yeah,
gone?
and
Did you not? Did you not see that one coming? That one seems like a pretty like that probably was going to happen kind of situation.
well, in hindsight, yes. My hindsight is really good.
40/40 hindsight.
Um, my best journal fail was I had completed a journal of all of these observations, and then I had done a lot of that with there's a lot of pencil drawings in it. And so what I did is I would take then some fixative and put that, because I discovered that if you have facing pages with graphite on them and then you turn the page and then you can it can just sort of make a mess of all of your pencil work.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
I hit this with fixative. What could possibly go wrong? I found this thing called workable fixative,
Right.
and that's neat. And I'm sure in some contexts it works great. I also discovered that it makes a wonderful contact adhesive.
That's what I was going to say. I've had that experience too, where the pages stick together because you've sprayed it on both sides, right? It
Yes,
sticks to itself.
yes.
Yeah.
So you get this block that was separate pages, and you've now glued them all together. Yeah.
Like,
Um,
why is that? Is it because I mean, I should Is it because people in the art supply business would never occur to somebody that they would do that in a sketchbook? They just think of like, oh, you only do it on sheets of paper. That's probably what it is. Never occurred to them
I
that you would do that.
I guess that's right. Um,
People don't think. I mean, I'll tell you, people in the art supply business don't think about sketchbooks enough. They don't think about it.
uh,
They just don't consider it to be a serious thing. They think it's always a throwaway sort of thing, and they don't think of sketchbook artists. It's not.
yeah,
We
it's
are
yeah.
a
For us,
blighted
this
minority,
sketchbook isn't just something that we're kind of doing on the side, and
right?
then we do our art. It's our practice, it's our process, and it's our product.
And that's the thing. I mean, that was one of the things that bothered me at this show that I was at in Orlando was all the examples that they would show. It all felt like from another era, you know, like these incredible. On the packaging, they have like these perfect, really like drawings and paintings that nobody can really do, but all feel like they came out of, like old school art instruction books. I don't know. There's like a level of perfection. I have to say, Derwent was different because Derwent, like in fact, my friend Jedediah did packaging for them, and they were using more like urban, sketchy kind of loose stuff in
That's
their
cool.
in their
Yeah.
examples, right? It's like they show you the stuff on it, and you go like, yeah, well, I'll never do that. So like, why is that? Why is that the inspiration? Anyway, they probably, unlike me, don't agree that we should be encouraging people just to make lousy things. But still, it just felt like it was intimidating. One more reason that it's intimidating. Anyway, so
So
all right,
I've got one other kind of
yeah, another disaster
journal
story. That's
journal fail. um, so this one, I was able to recover from, but there was a while where I thought that I would be one journal less. Um, After graduate school, during graduate school, I worked with a group of other graduate students, and we spent the or part of our final year studying evolutionary ecology of Africa, and then with just this wonderful, beloved professor Ken Dial, we all went to Tanzania together and got in a big this sort of tractor like bus thing with open sides and drove around in this monster vehicle together and just observed and geeked out and had a great time. And we would camp out on the Serengeti in between for the nights. Well, one afternoon we arrived at what was to be our campsite, and I just did not have the situational awareness of kind of the rules of how you survive in Africa. Um, and there was a river. The Grometi River was just flowing gracefully close to our campsite. So we had to make sure that we weren't putting our tents in the places where the hippos would come out and things like that. Um, and there were very clear rules. If there's a hippo outside your tent, you don't go outside your tent. And but the I thought like, I'm just going to go I'm going to do a sketch over there. And so I went down by the river and plopped myself down like I do countless times in the Sierra Nevada, and was drawing this landscape of um, uh, drawing the landscape of the river upstream view. There's a big bank with these logs on it, and trees overhanging the water, and the Grometi River gracefully flowing by. And then I continued drawing the trees overhanging the bank that no longer had logs on it. And um, as I was drawing, for some reason, I got this sort of low brainstem kind of feeling something is amiss, and I don't know why, but I jumped up and ran back, maybe, you know, a few meters away from the water edge, and I kind of looked around, and there were no lions, there were no hyenas, but down by the out in the water, I could see these there there were crocodile eyes poking up, some backs of crocodiles that the logs on the other side had decided to crawl down the bank um, and into the water to go see what this is. And the crocodiles in the Grumeti are they can take a full size wildebeest, burst out of the water, grab it in their jaws, flip it over their back, and go have a snack. Um, and I would be, you know, less than a bite size. But I realized that I just this was a total safety fail on my part. And but then there were all my art supplies and my journal sitting in this sweet little pile right next to the water. And one of the guides came and said, like, no, you have to leave that there. And I was like, oh my, this is, you know, this is this is really different rules than than
I
I.
thought you were gonna say, and then it charged you, and you had a pencil. Unfortunately, it was a 6H, and it was nice and hard, and you were able to
Oh yeah.
jam it into its eye, and
Oh, can you imagine facing a crocodile with a 3B? That would be the
no,
worst.
that would be a disaster. No,
That'd be a
you need
disaster.
a hard pencil. You definitely need a
You
hard pencil.
definitely need a 6H there. But at one point, one of the people who had more experience with this figured a time that he thought it was safe and went and gathered my things for me and gave my kit back to me. But yeah, don't sketch next to the Grumeti. Since then, I've seen, you know, if anybody, you know, is at home, just do a little search for Grumeti River crossing wildebeest, and you'll see you'll get a chance to see these Grumeti River crocodiles in action.
Nice.
The Grumeti is turns out is famous for its crocodiles, and I'm just glad I didn't become part of the food chain that day.
Me too. I'm glad that you and your sketchbook survived. So I think we should go back to the topic because I feel like we're not really giving him
Oh,
advice on
okay.
what to do. Because because I think the way I started was I'm by nature a miser, so I would always buy like cheap stuff, and so you buy yourself a set of cheap watercolors, and it's usually a really unpleasant experience, right? If you buy
Hmm.
cheap,
Hmm.
they just feel like you're working and scratching your cheap brush across these cheap hard pans of watercolor, and like not much color is coming up because there's so much binder in them, and they're just kind of anemic. And then you put down some paper that isn't really watercolor paper, and the colors are just flat and grayish, and it's just not a great experience. And you blame yourself for it, or you think, I don't know, I don't know how to use watercolors, or you don't even notice it, but it's just not joyful. Um, which isn't to say again that you need to go out and spend hundreds of dollars in watercolors, but there definitely is a feeling that you get that's different, particularly with watercolors. I think there are other things that other categories. Colored pencils, again, expensive colored pencils can be really nice, but inexpensive colored pencils can be pretty good. Like you could buy a set of Crayola colored pencils, at your drugstore for $5, and they would probably be perfectly fine to do a lot of cool stuff with. You could also work in things like tempera, right? Tempera is the kind of paint that they use in kindergarten, and it's something you can work with. But crayons, again, another thing that's inexpensive but can be really expressive, and there's a lot of creative things that you can do with it. But I think picking up stuff that kids use is not a bad place to begin, particularly if you're trying to figure out whether you really like art making enough
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
invest in it. Because I think if you go out and immediately you're like, I'm going to start making art, and then you go out and spend hundreds of dollars, you're gonna end up in this situation. But I think if you just say, let me do what kids do, um, you can even work with just stuff you can get in an office supply store. You can work with highlight markers theoretically. There's certainly inexpensive supplies that will do a lot of what you want to do with art. It will certainly give you the opportunity to do the things that we talk about here on this podcast a lot, which is to just be in the moment, to get in the zone, to express yourself, to play, all that kind of thing is totally doable without a big investment. Do you agree with that?
I do. And especially if you're, and the way I usually frame things, I'm thinking about nature journaling. I'm thinking about the process of using a journal to help you observe some phenomenon of the world around you, be that a sunset or a peony or a rock formation or a bird or tracks in the mud or a spider web, whatever it is that you found. I use the journal to kind of geek out on that at a deeper level. And for that, the art itself is not my goal. It's not my focus. But um, I will use art as a tool in service of paying attention. So especially in that context, the tools for entry, it's a really low bar. You basically need a Dixon Ticonderoga #2 pencil and something that you can take some notes on, and you go from there. Um, and then you can, but soon you start to figure it. Like I really do want, I want to play with color, or you'll and let yourself kind of incrementally upgrade as you naturally feel that you want to do just a little bit more. Don't feel that you should be doing something else. If you um, if you're happy with just the #2 pencil, go for that, and that's fine. My favorite illustrator, William D. Barry, did most of his stuff just with a pencil, and the but but there are some entry level kits that are great. There are some entry level tools that usually I think are terrible. I think that, for instance, you can get a watercolor set that is made for kids. Um, specifically, the Prang oval pan watercolor set comes with this 16 well set. They're great little paints, and they're made for kids. They're non-toxic. So with watercolors for kids, the primary thing with it is that the most important feature of them is that the kid can eat all of those paints and not get poisoned with cadmium. So, but the Prang set
Always a good
is,
thing.
yeah, that's always a good thing. Um, the Prang set is great, but the problem is, I think, is that the brushes that usually come with a kid's watercolor set, Winslow Homer couldn't do anything with those.
That's why you got to get a
And
water brush. I mean,
exactly.
water brushes are $5 to $7, and they're pretty
Hmm.
good synthetic brushes, and they have
Yes.
the added benefit of being a water brush. So if you don't know what a water brush is, it is a plastic handled brush. The handle is hollow, so you can fill it with water. You squeeze it, and it comes out through the bristles. So I mean, particularly for nature journaling, I mean, it's probably the most amazing innovation in art history, don't you think?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I started using water brushes for stuff in the field, and now in my studio. I don't have
Yeah.
any conventional brushes. I've got water brushes. I do everything now with water brushes, and just love those little things.
They are really
And
nice.
yeah, it's yeah, there are two water brushes that I like. I really like the Pentel Aquash large fine point water brush.
Is that the one with
Um,
the big fat body, like the big fat barrel, like it sticks out?
yes,
Yeah, those
that's
are
right.
really good.
So it's not round, so it doesn't roll off a table.
That's a
Um,
good point too.
they've got a great, yeah, and the point of it has got enough spring. Some of the other brands, the brush tips either don't get sharp, or they're just really spongy. They're so soft that there's no kind of kinesthetic sense that the tip of my brush has hit my paper. I'm not getting that feedback loop. So I really like the just the springiness and the texture of the brush tips of those things. And they come in several sizes, and I find the small ones too small, the medium ones too medium, but the large one is for me the just right one.
I mean,
Um,
another strategy towards this is not necessarily to buy inexpensive materials, but to focus what you're doing. So, for instance, when I started and I felt the need for color after drawing with just a roller ball pen for a year and a half or two, was to buy one brush pen marker.
mm,
So,
what color did you
again,
get?
light gray, a cool gray.
That's great. That's I love that approach.
Yeah, and then I got a warm gray because I wanted to see how would I use the two of them. And then I got eventually I got a different kind of gray, and so and then I would carry those around with me, and they are again they're not expensive, $2 or $3, but it allows you to kind of just ease your way into tone. And then I started to add a color brush or two here and there, and it was a slow process. I didn't go out and buy like the giant set with all of the ones. I would just pick one at a time. Most of them are available as what they call open stock, where you can just buy one color and you can slowly work your way through. And you could do the same thing with colored pencil. You could buy, um, you know, a buy an expensive colored pencil. Again, it's not going to be very
Hmm.
much, but you could just
Hmm.
buy the primary colors, or you could just buy, if you want to just draw people, just buy, a couple of tones and
Yeah.
work in that. I think it not only is it economical, but also it'll help you to learn how to use color in a much more conscious, deliberate way. And I think you also make nice looking stuff because it's working with a limited palette, which means that your page is kind of pulled together. There's not like 50 different colors thrown at it when you don't really understand how to use color. Instead, it's like, you might use two complementary colors, have an orange and a purple, have, an orange and a blue, or have a purple and yellow, and just have those two colors and see, and then you can mix them and see what happens. So that kind of, and then, as you start to believe in yourself, you expand it a little bit more, and then maybe you say, let me try a more expensive version of one of these. So bit by bit, you can get yourself to really know exactly what you're doing, why you're spending the money, because you've understood what makes a $1 colored pencil different from a $3 colored pencil. You will know
Hmm.
that from having done it yourself. And frankly, one colored pencil will last you for a year. I mean, even if you walk around with one colored pencil, I hope that it doesn't. I hope that you grind through it much faster. But um, it's it's much more and that's not the way necessarily the business wants to sell you stuff. They want to sell you the big, sexy 48 color box of colored pencils, but you can buy one tube of watercolor. You can buy really basic things of gouache, and you can ease your way into it. Because again, as you were saying, it's not about creating something fantastic necessarily. It's about learning, observing, and gaining confidence.
I think that's good advice, and you also don't feel pressure that then you're modifying that kit organically as you feel the need for it, as opposed to I'm going to get all this gear, and then because I've got all this gear, I'm going to go sketch more, and then you end up with a box of art supplies that you don't use sitting in the closet of your house. Um, your suggestion about the brush pen, I think, is great. The light value. I really like the Tombow N95. So it's not just a good mask for preventing transmission of COVID. It's the N95 is the number of this sort of light brush pen that they have, and then maybe an N65, which is it gives you kind of put punches in your darks, and you can play with tones for a while, or if you decide at some point, I want to play with color. I find that the easiest way to kind of jump into color is with colored pencils rather than watercolor. Watercolor seems to me there's a little bit more of a learning curve, and there's a while at the start where like I've got wet paper, like what do I do? There's like too much pools of water. But if you're just wanting like I would like to have color, I think that a small set of colored pencils where you can overlap those colors to build other colors, you can you can do so much just with a small set of colored pencils. And you can get those. There are inexpensive quality ones like General's pencils. I like their colored pencil line. Um, Low cost, and you get some really good stuff.
What about crayons?
I haven't. Do you mean the wax crayons like Crayola?
Yeah,
I don't have sort of adult experience drawing with those.
you should try. You
And
should try it. They're really. It's fun to blend them and to try and get sophisticated effects out of them. Well,
oh,
first of all,
that's cool.
there's a gazillion colors, but also you can do that, and then you can also do stuff to it. You can, use it as a wax resist, so you could paint over it with watercolor. You can put crayon on top of watercolor. You can, you can scratch at it. You can iron it. You can do other kind of cool things with it. But I think to just have one or two crayons in your pocket. I mean, they don't leak, and even if they
That's
break, they
good.
still work, right?
Oh,
And
but
you don't need
if you leave them in the hot car, danger.
true. True. Yes. So, but and they work better with certain kinds of paper, but I think they're not a bad thing. They're not a bad thing.
Hmm.
And I don't know, are they archival? They might be. Certainly, there's
Hmm.
been a lot of kids' drawings done in crayons have lasted for decades and generations, right? So
This is true.
maybe they are archival, and they're certainly inexpensive. Um, and I think that they're an overlooked tool. So,
Hmm.
but also it's cool to go to the kids section of the art supply store. There's usually one, that has poster paints and pipe cleaners and all those kinds of things, and they're also usually inexpensive. I think the thing that is bad, and I don't know, really like to use that word, but the sets that they give to kids who are like an uncle or a grandparent will buy. Here, you
Oh,
like making art. Here, I
yes,
bought you
I
this
know where you're
art
going.
set, right? And you open it up, and it has like
Some cheap
all
pastels, some cheap watercolors, some cheap
horrible
colored pencils,
markers. Yeah, all
a,
so many
a
of them.
kneaded eraser that is already dried out,
Yeah, really
and
horrible brush that's like a
yes,
drinking
that's right.
straw with a sort of a Q-tip stuck in the end, and
Yeah.
but it all comes in like a really nice case, that
Yes,
has like things that
that's right.
hinge out or like trays that come out. Oh God, I think I bought one of those at the beginning of the pandemic. Now that I think about it, did I buy it or somebody gave it to me? I think it's something. I think my sister-in-law had it in the house because when
You
at the
like
beginning,
art?
well, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was, we because we had come here by accident, we had no art supplies except whatever I had in my small carry-on bag, and I wasn't planning to draw that weekend, so I really brought very, very little. And then it
Hmm.
was like I was hunting around my sister-in-law's house constantly trying to gather anything that resembled an art supply. So it would be like a highlight marker
Mm,
or
yeah.
those kinds of things. And then I found this kit that like I don't know if they bought for somebody for Christmas or something, and it was also really old, which made it even worse. So yeah, don't
Nice.
buy those.
Yeah, yeah. I would steer clear of those. But but when you decide, like, if we do decide, I want to do some watercolor. I think that the easiest sort of the tiered entry for that, I would say start with if you're just maybe I'd like to do this. You can get the Prang 16 well watercolor set. and um, that does a that's a great little kit. Um, Claire Walker Leslie, the nature journaler, as that's all she uses.
No kidding, really?
In yeah,
I didn't know
she's a
that.
praying booster. Um, but then what you can do is you can take that, and then there's just a couple of little tweaks that are going to make it even better. Um, and so what I would do is I would it comes with white watercolor in it, so I would get rid of that, pop it out, and they sell a a magenta refill, and so then um, you can have magenta turns out to be such an important color. It usually doesn't, because it's a true primary color, but it doesn't show up in most um, watercolor kits because they put in red. So why would I also need magenta? But you can buy your own little magenta um, one and stick that into the kit where the white was. And I also recommend that people sort of pop the wells out and reorganize them, so that I like to have sort of in my kits like all the warm colors together in one little block, the blues and cools in another little block, and all the neutrals in another little block. And that sort of allows you to kind of then, when you're on the easel sort of mixing paints, there's an adjacent mixing zone for each of those.
That's interesting. You know, what you could also do is if you did buy a praying set and then you found that there were one or two colors that you were using the most, go
Mm-hmm.
out and buy like a Winsor Newton professional pan, just the one
There you
pan of
go.
that color, and substitute it in and see does it make a difference if you're using one that costs a
Yeah,
lot more. And then you might say, you know what, this is game changing, or you might just say, I'm happy with the praying.
yeah,
Feel like I fit in.
or so if for that, I would recommend that they go out and they get a tube of that color, because
And
they're
refill.
oval
Yeah.
pans, and then you can refill with that. Um, the next sort of step up from the prang, I would say, is the Cotman Skechers Pocket Box, which is this. It's a wonderful little compact white kit that has 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 the, the sort of Cotman level cakes in it, but the case that it comes in, I think, is terrific. And then I would do the same thing with that. It comes with Chinese white. I would get rid of that and maybe put in neutral tint. I would get rid of the alizarin crimson that comes in it and put in some quinacridone magenta. But you can buy, as you're using things up in that case, you can then replace them with, if you want to place them with student grade, or if you want to, you can upgrade them one at a time to artist grade colors, and then you'll be like, ooh,
Cotman
it
is the Winsor Newton student grade brand.
that's right.
And yeah, and also, I mean, you just take a tube of paint, squeeze it into the pan, and as it dries, it will become like all the other pans. It's actually, I always think, slightly better than the stuff that comes in the pan, although it's kind of almost the same. Well,
Yeah.
listen, we're running out of time because I know you have to go. So I want to wrap it up and say this has been fun. I feel like we could just talk about art supplies all the time. I don't know if people want that instead of talking about brains and other stuff, but it's always really fun to talk about gear, and I learned a lot from you today too. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And um, I hope that at least everybody, after listening to this podcast, they're going to run out and put their name in their journal.
But definitely. And also that they're going to run out and write an email to podcast@sketchbookskool.com and tell us. People have been sending us poems, advice, questions, life stories, all kinds of stuff. We love hearing from you. And we were going to read a poem, but we've run out of time. Ah, well, next time. Next time,
Next
join
time,
us
my
then.
friends.
And we'll see you then for Art for All.